church. You know, when Alistair invited me to come here and to preach to you this morning, I wasn't nervous at all. And then last week, someone told me that Stanborough Park Church, oh wow, that's the closest to heaven you will ever be. And then I got a bit nervous. And this morning, as Sister Clee, am I pronouncing it right? She told the children's story, and she did the development offering story as well. I started getting even more nervous. You know, I might not be up to her level. I just want to introduce myself because this is the first time I'm here. You do have a lovely church, but now that I know you, it's time for you to know me somehow. My name is João. I come from Portugal, and I'm a master's student at Newbold. I like football. I like to read. I like to see movies and TV series, and I like animals, especially dogs. And the story I'm telling you this morning is connected to my love of dogs. You know, about 1 year ago, my cousins who live near Newbold, they asked me to do something for them. They needed my help. They were going away for a few days, and they needed someone who could take care of their large dogs. And so they asked me, can you do it? And because I love dogs, I said, yes, sure, no problem. Okay, so if you're going to do it, you need three things. You need a key to the place. You need one of our cars so that you can travel back and forth. And you need to listen carefully to our instructions. And then they gave me 3 pieces of advice. Remember, they said, you have to feed the dogs in the morning and in the evening. You have to take them out to the nearby park at least once per day. And I couldn't remember the third thing. So the following day, as I was pulling the car into the driveway, I was trying as hard as I could to remember what was that little third piece of precious advice that they had so wisely given me. And then, as I stepped out of the car, and as I looked towards the 2-meter tall side gate, and as I saw the massive body of Nova, the youngest of the dogs, slowly emerging from it on a single, surprisingly gracious but yet powerful leap, suddenly I remembered what they had said. And be careful. Nova has learned how to climb the side gate, and she is not afraid to show you she can do it. Now, as I chased a very happy and free Nova, trying to prevent her from running away from my cousin's property and to get herself and myself into more trouble, I can't tell you that I really felt upset by my inability to remember what they had said. Of course, I can't tell you that. It doesn't mean that I didn't feel upset. And as I was recalling that story and trying to prepare this sermon and to see how these two things would be connected, I couldn't help think that somehow, in some particular way, I did understand what Peter must have felt through when he finally heard the cock crow. Suddenly, Peter remembered what Jesus had said. And he went out crying, and crying bitterly. Surely he thought to himself, like I did when Nova flew over the side gate, how could I not see this coming? Well, yes, Peter. How exactly could you not see this coming? Just a bit of context to the story. Soon after the Passover meal, Jesus had predicted that all of his disciples would desert him. And when Peter said that he would never desert him, Jesus told him, well, in fact, this night, this very night, before the cock crows, you will deny me 3 times. No, that's not possible. I would never deny you, he said. And all of the disciples followed his lead and said the exact same thing. But when Jesus got arrested, all of them fled. All of them fled. All of them? Well, all of them except for one. For we are told in verse 58 that the courageous Peter was following Jesus from a distance, and he also went into the palace of the high priest as far as the courtyard, and he sat there amongst the guards because he wanted to see the end. So while Jesus is being tried inside by the high priest and the Jewish council, this is exactly where we find Peter, sitting outside in the courtyard amongst the guards, courageously holding up to his promise. You know, the last disciple standing, or should I say sitting, holding up the promise of never deserting Jesus, even if he had to face great personal risk. And that's exactly where the first servant girl finds him too. She looks at Peter. She sees him there sitting amongst the guards. She approaches him and she says, "You were also with Jesus of Galilee." Now, most preachers would tell you that she probably wanted to denounce him. But I'm not like most preachers. Quoting a famous Portuguese in this country, I think I'm a special one. So let me pose the question, what if she wasn't trying to denounce him? What if she was looking for someone who could bear witness to what Jesus had done? Because at that right moment, inside the palace, Jesus was being tried, and all of these false witnesses came forward, and they bore false testimony about Jesus. But Peter was a true witness. He had been with Jesus ever since Jesus called him when he was a fisherman back in the Sea of Galilee. He had seen Jesus raising up a dead girl. He had seen Jesus in all of his glory on the Mount of Transfiguration. He had seen all of the miracles and healings and Jesus' love and service for others. He surely could testify for his master. But instead, he opens his mouth and he says, "I do not know what you are saying." Well, in reality, in the original, he says something like, "I do not see what you are saying." You don't see what she's saying? Really, Peter? You don't see it? You were with Jesus. How can you pretend that you weren't? But still, this small alternative fact is enough to make the girl go away. But now Peter is really starting to feel uncomfortable. He had come there to see exactly how this story would end, but he hadn't come in to be seen by others. And now he had been recognized. So just like brave Sir Robin in Monty Python's Holy Grail, bravely taking to his feet, Peter beat a very brave retreat into the entrance. But when he gets there, another servant girl spots him. She looks at him, she sees him there in the entrance, but this time she doesn't come to him. She tells all of those who are standing there, "This man was with Jesus of Nazareth." This time it is clear that he is being denounced by the servant girl. So the social pressure is growing. And Peter starts to think, what if they arrest me? Even worse, what if they kill me? This time he needs to deny it even more strongly. So he opens his mouth and he denies the accusation with an oath, literally saying, I've never seen the man. Oh yes, Peter, you have. You may pretend that you have never seen him, but we all know that you have. And now, as you let the social pressure silence you, you are put in stark contrast with those two blind men who, not long ago, wanted to see Jesus so desperately that they kept shouting and shouting when everyone was trying to silence them. This time, Peter has really succumbed to the social pressure. Some minutes pass, and for a third time, Peter is put to the test. The bystanders see him there, they hear him speaking, and there's something in the way that Jesus speaks that reminds them of, something in the way that Peter speaks that reminds them of Jesus' disciples. So they approach him and they tell him, "Look, we are sure that you are one of them." "Really?" asks Peter. "How come?" "Well," they say, "the way you speak makes you visible." That's literally what it says in the original. And the sentence is clearly a pun. While Peter told the first servant girl that he couldn't see what she was saying, this whole time what he was saying was making him clearly visible to everyone. So now, Peter, the question is, everyone can see what you're trying to do. What do you have to say in your defense? And as we turn to Peter, instead of recognizing what everyone else already knows, he swears. And he denies the accusation again with another oath, this time shouting, "I've never seen the man!" And as he finishes these words, the cock crows, and Peter remembers what Jesus had told him. He remembers his 3 denials. "I don't see what you are saying. I've never seen the man. I've never seen the man." And he goes out crying and crying bitterly. How come he couldn't see this coming, you may ask? Well, he couldn't see it because apparently he had been struck blind. I've recently read a book entitled Blindness, written by a Portuguese author called José Saramago. And the plot revolves around this mysterious and very contagious illness that spreads through the world and turns everyone blind. And in it, we follow a group of characters that have, of course, turned blind, and we see how they navigate through this new blind world. One night, just before they go to sleep, they are talking to each other, and all of a sudden the topic comes up. "What was the last thing you saw before you went blind?" someone asks. And so they go around, and all of them have their different things, the different things they saw before they went blind. And when they are finished, one of the girls in the group notices a common trend. She says, "Fear. Fear can cause blindness." Another character says, "Never a truer word. Fear struck us blind. Fear will keep us blind." When I read Peter's story, I can only wonder if he too was struck blind by fear. If he was going through this sort of selective blindness that allowed him to decide what he saw and what he didn't see. A selective blindness that prevented him from, on that moment, helping out his very good friend, Jesus. And the truth is that a certain amount of selective blindness, even today, comes in handy for some of us. It comes in handy for me at least. Because sometimes I too use this selective blindness. And we all do it. Like when we see someone being financially exploited by someone else, and we pretend we didn't see Jesus casting out the sellers out of the temple because they were exploiting a corrupt system so that they could take advantage of the lower classes of their society. And we simply look away and we say, I'm sorry, I don't see it. Or when a young Muslim woman is wrongly accused of not being compassionate enough to a victim of terrorism, and we forget that we have seen Jesus saving the adulterous woman from those who were accusing her, and we simply look the other way and we say, I'm sorry, I don't see it. Or when we see thousands and thousands of refugees coming to our shores, looking for a better life because they were persecuted in their own countries. And we forget that we have seen Jesus running away to Egypt because someone else was persecuting him. And we look the other way and we say, I'm sorry, I don't see it. Now, fear is not the only thing capable of striking us blind, of course. Some of us may be struck blind by simple laziness. We can't be bothered to see. Some of us may be struck blind by our busy work schedules. We don't have the time to see. Some of us may be struck blind by our unwillingness to change our perspective. We are simply so used to one way of seeing things that we can't be bothered to see someone else who thinks differently than us. But I wonder, is this really what God is calling us to do? Is this really what God is calling us to do as Christians and as Seventh-day Adventists? I mean, I do believe that we need a bit of discernment and wisdom to know when to speak out and when to be quiet. But there are some things that are so blatantly wrong that we can't just ignore them. And I really think that our God calls us to two things. And this is the lesson that I draw from Peter's denial story. First, he calls us to fight the blindness that keeps us from learning more from him. And second, he calls us to fight the blindness that keeps us from seeing what is happening all around us. And when we fight those blindnesses, we are able to speak out for those in need. And hopefully, we are able to implement the kingdom of God on this earth. As I conclude this sermon, I once again recall Saramago's book. At the end of his book, when almost everyone has already recovered sight, we find the two main characters, a couple, discussing the reason for the mysterious blindness. Why did we become blind, she asks. He replies, I don't know. Do you want me to tell you what I think, she asks again. Please do, he says. I don't think we went blind. I think we are blind. Blind people who see, he asks. She replies, blind people who seeing do not see. Blind people who seeing do not see. We cannot afford to be blind people who seeing do not see. The things we see, we must stand for. We must speak up. So my prayer this morning is, dear God, do not let us become blind people who seeing do not see. Do not let us become that, please. Amen.
You